Okay, finally we come to the end of How the Great Religions Began by Joseph Gaer, Book 3, The Advance of the One God. Part 5, The Reformation. Out of the Dark Ages. And Section 7, The American-Born Sects. In America, every type of Christian is to be found. Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and almost all of the 200 different Protestant sects are represented here. I think there's over 400 in America alone. In addition to the European-born Christian sects that thrive in America, we have a number that originated on American soil. Most outstanding of the American sects are Mormonism and Christian Science. Mormonism was founded about a century ago by one Joseph Smith of the state of New York, who claimed to have found a book written on gold plates revealed to him by an angel called Moroni. Joseph Smith, with some friends, organized a new church, which they called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The members of this church are also called Mormons because Mormons, believers in the Book of Mormon, found by Joseph Smith. The first one says authored by Joseph Smith, but he did have his 9 different contradictory accounts of his first vision. But one of the so-called miraculous things is the utter ease in carrying around 60, 100 pounds worth of metal plates around, all half lame and all, outrunning a mob and all that. That part's left out. So one wonders, did he forget things, or did he just make up things to enhance his story? There are almost 500,000 Mormons in the world today, most of them in or around Salt Lake City, Utah. Yet they firmly believe and proclaim to the world that theirs is the only true and living church upon the face of the whole earth. And in coming decades, them and the Catholics are going to be the top churches. And which one's going to be most of the remaining Christians? We'll see as America falls from being a Christian majority. Much more recent in appearance is the sect known as Christian Science, which makes the news a lot because they try to prosecute people for not involving themselves in medicine, which they don't believe in. Founded only a little over 50 years ago, about the 1900s, I don't remember what year, Miss Mary Baker Eddy. Miss Eddy wrote a book called Science and Health, with a key to the scriptures, in which she tried to explain how the sick can be healed through faith. Miss Eddy, like Joseph Smith and many others before her, organized a church. This church she called the First Church of Christ Scientist. Miss Eddy's church soon found many followers in America, as well in other countries. Like Mormonism, and like all the sects that appear, Christian Science claims to be the only true Christian church. And I may find and share other reasons why there is no true Christian church, but we'll leave that for another time. But no matter how the many Protestant sects differ from one another, they all agree there can be a good Christian without paying homage to the Pope, and that the Roman Catholic Church is not the only true Christian church in the world. Early in 1950, it was estimated that there was about 323 million Roman Catholics in the world, about 127 million followers of the Greek Orthodox Church and about 160 million Protestants, the total number of Christians in the world being 610 million, are 1/4 of the world's population. Now, they're not the most numerous faith. Islam and Buddhism triumph over all the Christians combined in that terms. In our own time, in the beginning, as we have seen, people observed the sun rise and set each day. They heard the wind go through the woods and saw the clouds gather in the sky. And in time they observed season follow season, as night follows day and day follows night. Man of long ago asked questions about all the forces of nature which surrounded him, and he answered these questions saying, the forces of nature have spirits that can do both good and evil. Now, the scientific explanation of these things does not say that there's not any presences, but the use in ancient times, and oh, this is a female, and this is a male force, and oh, male and male, female, female, and that resulted in some things in their behavior. But anyways, our savage forefathers, many thousands of years ago, did not know the difference between animate and inanimate things. To them, the trees, the flowers, the rivers, the oceans, the stones, and the mountains were all alive. They had spirits. Islam teaches that everything is going to bear witness, whether it had animate life or not. But there are spirits of different sorts. The spirits in animals, the spirits that dwell in the earth and whatnot. The elements, too, were believed to have spirits. The sun and the moon and the stars and the rain and the wind and the storm, thunder and lightning, all these were beings to our primitive ancestors, beings alive and free to do as they pleased, both good and evil. Now, revealed religion doesn't go that far into saying the presence in nature of creations. This belief in the spirits of nature was the beginning of the earliest religion of mankind, and it led people to worship nature and animals and their ancestors. After many, many years, perhaps centuries, our forefathers passed from nature worship to idol worship. Though most people today hold idolatry, idol worship, in contempt, it really marked a great advance over the earlier nature worship. Now, that's something I disagree with. If you're going to worship other than God, stop this. Oh, worshiping a prophet or a Messiah is better than this, and worshiping an idol as well is better than this. And, well, there's worship with idols. There's art that doesn't quite mean what people think. A lot of these statues, once we find out the history, the oral history and stuff behind it, they were symbols, not, see that thing with 8 arms? That's what God looks like. Certainly that crept in with a lot of it. And even you saw this, thou shalt not make any graven images sort of thing going on when the initial writings of that in the Tanakh, or what texts got put into the Tanakh, you had hands and you had heads of a human and an ox, and so it obviously meant something other than just. But that was language, like hieroglyphs and stuff. You see a guy folding his arms, Amin. But anyways, but with the development of idolatry, the number of things and beings worshipped multiplied rapidly. Images were made not only for all the existing nature gods, ancestors, and various animals, but also for newly conceived gods, such as the gods of the various families. gods of tribes, gods presiding over the boundary lines between farms, and so on. And that's another thing where I have a problem with. If you look at the actual translation, a better translation of a lot of these things, you find light beings and fire beings, and sometimes they thought there were multiple gods, but a lot of the time they thought that there was something else very explicitly that was different from all these other things. Yes, there could have been worship of these other things, but it's like the difference between a creator and a demiurge. Because demiurge comes from a worksman, a craftsman that takes something that already is and makes something. And not all things labeled as demiurges are, of course, actually putting that forth themselves. Remember that painting that I have up there of my experience, how that one being came out and said, hey, I spoke to some, I forget exactly what it says, but I spoke to some guy behind an image, and this confusion became worship. And as we have seen, with the multiplication of the gods, came a multiplication of hatred and struggle between tribes and families and individuals. In time, wise leaders realized that at the root of all this evil was idol worship. Did they? Did they realize that? And they began to preach against it. And the great religions, as we have known them today, came into existence. Then the belief in many gods gave way to the belief in one God. And what we see is kind of different. It's like people thought, oh, that's too easy. Let's, enhance things. And we want a direct experience. And we can directly experience some random spirit in the woods. But the creator of all, no. Or we can work ourselves into a state out by this rock over here. Because there's something weird going on with this rock over here. And polytheism and reincarnation, a lot of things had to be worked out for people to believe them and think them. And it's like nowadays, a lot of groups, give them respect but not worship. So they don't want to admit that they're worshiping. Admit that you worship, This was the greatest advance in the development of religion. For the belief in one God leads to the belief in the unity of the world. And this, in turn, leads to the belief in the unity of mankind. The believer in one God, or monotheist, as he is called, well, a lot of the people are monotheistic, which is only pseudo-monotheism. It's like, if a Christian is monotheist, doesn't that label virtually all the polytheist religions as monotheists because they have a, thing towards the Godhead, and or they worship one, or they worship a group, and therefore that's monotheistic because Christianity has all these themes of father, mother, child, If that doesn't put the plural into the theism, I don't know what does. Realizes that all of mankind must be regarded as one large family, different as may be the color of people's skins, the words of their speech, or the manner of their daily lives. More than that, the true monotheist realizes that whatever any one race does affects all other races. Whatever one nation does affects all other nations. Whatever one person does affects all other people, for good or for evil. And from this, the true monotheist is forced to conclude that only what is good for mankind at large is good for the individual, and what is bad for mankind is bad for the individual in the long run. This is what is meant by the brotherhood of man, that all the great religions of today preach, and this brotherhood of man can be attained not through hatred, but love, not through strife, but cooperation, not through war, but peace. Oh, you can have spiritual war, and let's not condemn hate, Let's not condemn fear. They all have their benefit and balance. So that, in our own time, in a world full of pain and confusion with bitterness, the world's religions find themselves faced with one common mission, the mission of peace. Well, you find that whether some guy in California just started making up his own stuff or whatever. That's about the only time where you don't have a group that's mostly like the others. Regardless of the differences between religion and religion, our creed and creed, to fulfill the promise to the followers, they must all gather together under the one banner bearing the inscription, "The mission of mankind is peace." And peace is a nice feeling. Contentment. And I follow faith. That's the expression of wholeness. The expression of peace, surrender, submission. And really it is. You have this wheel. Think of it as all like a wheel. The wheel slows down. And you find a place where you can be on the wheel. Your beliefs and your deeds kind of put you somewhere. Which are the great living religions? All of them. How do they differ from one another? And how are they alike? There are different degrees of truth and good. And in almost all of them, differing degrees of evil and ignorance. And in all of them, people who don't believe or follow to the fullest. How did the idea of God first occur to man? I believe that human beings knew before they were born. I believe that human beings have an instinctual drive. But does that mean that all the prescribed forms of any one nation were there? Certainly not. But then humanity put limits on it. And that's where Sigmund Freud is right. Sigmund Freud's wrong about a lot of things with religion. That's proven wrong, that even sort of wrong beliefs, people are better off psychologically and sociologically and all sorts of stuff. But when it comes to their God's a male, God's a female, mother, daughter, son, father, animal forms, plant forms, mineral forms, geometric forms, people who think they're God or part God. All these things can be tied to certain psychological issues. So Sigmund Freud was right about that. Which great religion does not admit the existence of a creator? Well, people say that about a lot of things. Now we'd say atheism, but honestly, I've never met an atheist that I talked to in detail that doesn't believe in a higher power, or God as you'd call it. They don't trust the Bible, like Thomas Paine told people not to trust the Bible for various reasons, but they believe in that higher power. So you can say that. Buddhism, it depends on the Buddhism, whether they seek refuge in the Buddha in the way that a Muslim might seek refuge with God. And there's variation. There's people who actually might look to those texts and say, the guy believed in God and worshipped, but we're going to ignore that, right? Same thing with Jainism. Jainism people might worship, they might not. Here is the enlightening story of the world's great religions, told simply, instructively, and reverently, told through the life stories of the world's spiritual leaders. And later we had figures like Joseph Campbell, which I really looked up to, and I thought, one world religion inflected through humanity. I got to find out more than what this guy said. Told through the life stories of the world's spiritual leaders. Sort of a slanted sort of way, but at times. With the peoples of the world thrown increasingly together, it becomes ever more necessary and urgent that men of different cultures and civilizations should not only know but understand each other. For that understanding, some awareness and appreciation of different values and patterns is imperative. Some people today are reciting a passage of the scripture of this age that basically says, let people believe or disbelieve whatever they want. That is what they really want in this theocracy, in their idea of theocracy. That's how they're being radical. The New American Library, bringing good books to a mass audience at a low price, is certainly to be congratulated for making its striking contribution also in this field. To include a work on comparative religion among its first titles in the new and admirable Signet Key series is imaginative and significant. And that is a quote by Wilford C. Smith, the W. M. Burks Professor of Comparative Religion at McGill University. And this was originally published in, 1929? But when engravings by Frank W. Peters, copyright 1929, and fair use in my presentations because I'm commenting on. Ladies' Home Journal says the following about this book. Religions begin with a seed. Some do not develop at all, some die young, and some grow into towering heights with many flourishing branches. But all religions are related to each other. And that's true, because behind it all is the one true religion, revealed to all the nations of the world. Maybe throughout time. Maybe some, they were heard of for thousands of miles, for thousands of years, and that was enough. But there's a difference between religion and sect, church and religion, temple and religion. These are the inspiring stories of the men who founded the world's great religions, some of which are not so old that we do not really know when they began. Vedic faith goes back as much as 40,000 years ago, and it contains information in certain texts that indicate maybe other human species, subspecies, I guess, that are extinct, passed on things to the modern humans. Our Revelation would explain that also. Here in this invaluable, always timely book is a perceptive and colorful explanation of the many faiths by which the far-flung world of 1954 lives and the deities to which it prays. In these beautiful stories of Buddha and Jesus, Zoroaster, Muhammad, Prince Mahavira, Martin Luther, and many others, it's the whole sweeping panorama of man's endless search for the meaning of his life. This is an exciting, different adventure into history, underscoring the basic principles of brotherhood and amity among nations. Your key to man's perpetual quest for the spiritual. Mr. Gaer has done an almost impossible job with much success. Dode Mead and Company was the original. But, so 25-cent book sells for about $60. And so religion, what is religion? It's a relationship with God and the creation. So you have to get it regulates your connection to everything. That's what being religious is. Now, you don't have to be religious if you don't want to. So, was this a book for everyone? young or old, who wants to learn about the spiritual life of humanity and the founders of men's faith throughout the ages, reverently told fascinating biographies of Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Buddha, Confucius, Lao Tse, and all who have led mankind to the heights of religious experience. Do not be stagnant. Bring out your own light. Amen.